If you like this story, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next exciting stories. And now let's enjoy the story. The crisp autumn air hung heavy with tension in the small town of Briarwood, nestled in the heart of Virginia. Sergeant Catherine Kate Logan, a decorated former military canine handler and now a police officer, walked briskly through the station's quiet halls. At her side was Titan, her Belgian Malinois partner, a dog with a lineage of service almost as distinguished as her own. Titan moved with an alert grace, his golden coat gleaming under the flickering fluorescent lights. He had saved lives on countless missions during Kate's years in Afghanistan, and now, as a member of the Briarwood Police Department, he had become a beacon of hope and safety for the community. "Morning, Sergeant Logan," Officer Davis called out, leaning against the front desk with a steaming cup of coffee. "Another quiet day in paradise?" Kate smirked. "Let's hope it stays that way, Davis." But peace was fleeting in Briarwood. Rumors had been swirling for weeks about a violent motorcycle gang known as the Black Vultures, whose influence was spreading across the state. These weren't just rowdy bikers. They were criminals with ties to international arms smuggling and drug trafficking. Their presence had already caused unease among the locals. Titan's ears perked up as the sound of revving motorcycle engines echoed in the distance. Kate's hand instinctively dropped to the leash, her finely tuned instincts from years of combat sharpening her senses. Moments later, the door to the station burst open. A civilian stumbled in, blood trickling down his face. His hands trembled as he pointed outside. They're out there! They attacked me and my friend!" Kate didn't need to ask who. She nodded to Davis, who called for backup, while she and Titan stepped outside. The sight awaiting them made her stomach churn. In the parking lot, 5 black vultures surrounded a young man cowering on the ground. His friend, a woman barely out of her teens, stood frozen nearby, her face pale with fear. The gang members were laughing, their tattoos and leather jackets glinting under the morning sun. One of them had a chain wrapped around his fist, and another brandished a crowbar. "Hey!" Kate shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Titan barked, his deep growl a warning that even seasoned criminals would hesitate to ignore. The gang turned to face her. Their leader, a towering man with a scar running down the side of his face, smirked. "Look who it is, the big bad cop and her mutt." Kate stepped forward, keeping Titan by her side. "Step away from them, now." The leader's smirk widened. "Or what? You gonna sick your little dog on us?" "Last warning," Kate said, her voice calm but firm. Titan's growl deepened. The leader chuckled and gestured to his men. "Let's see how tough this mutt really is." Before Kate could react, one of the gang members swung his crowbar at Titan. The dog's training kicked in, and he dodged with precision, his teeth snapping inches from the attacker's arm. Chaos erupted as the gang lunged at Kate and Titan. Kate fought with the precision of a soldier, her movements sharp and efficient. Titan was a blur of fur and muscle, defending his handler with unrelenting loyalty. But they were outnumbered, and the gang's attacks were brutal. Backup arrived just in time. Sirens wailed as squad cars screeched to a halt, and officers poured out, weapons drawn. The black vultures scattered, their motorcycles roaring to life as they sped away. But not before the leader locked eyes with Kate, his expression promising retaliation. That evening, Kate sat in the dimly lit office of the station, her hands trembling slightly as she reviewed the incident report. Titan lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws. Despite his injuries, a deep gash on his flank and a bruise on his hind leg, he had refused to leave her side. Captain Reyes entered, his face grim. "How's Titan?" "He'll be fine," Kate replied, though her voice betrayed her worry. "But this isn't over. Those bastards are going to come back." Reyes nodded. "We've already started coordinating with state and federal authorities. But Kate, these guys are dangerous. They're not just some local thugs. You need to be careful." Kate looked down at Titan, her resolve hardening. "They made a mistake attacking my partner. They think they can intimidate us, but they don't know who they're dealing with." Reyes hesitated, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "Just don't do anything reckless. We'll bring them down, together." But deep down, Kate knew this fight was personal. The Black Vultures hadn't just attacked her town, they'd attacked her family, and she wasn't going to let them get away with it. Late that night, as Briarwood slept under the glow of the moon, Kate sat by Titan's side, cleaning his wounds and whispering promises of justice. The Black Vultures had unleashed something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. This wasn't just a fight against a gang. This was a war. The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the small examination room, where chaos and fury churned within Chloe McAllister. Sitting beside a heavily sedated canine officer, Max, she clenched her fists, staring at the bandaged form of her loyal partner. The Belgian Malinois' muscular body was marred with gashes, bruises, and singed fur from the brutal attack. Yet even in his semi-conscious state, Max's ears twitched slightly, his instincts still on high alert. "He's a fighter," Dr. Julia Alvarez, the town's veterinary specialist, said softly as she adjusted the IV. "But Chloe, this wasn't just a random attack. The injury suggests they were targeting his tactical abilities. This was planned." Chloe's jaw tightened. She'd already suspected that. The biker gang known as the Iron Serpents had been escalating their presence in Oak Ridge. Last night's ambush was their cruelest move yet. They'd hurt Max not out of fear or necessity, but for sport, a calculated attempt to send a message. She glanced at the vet, her voice low but laced with steel. "Will he walk again?" Julia hesitated. "Physically? Yes, with time, but emotionally? He's been through a trauma. You know as well as anyone. Dogs remember." Chloe nodded, her hand gently resting on Max's paw, her eyes filled with determination. "So do I." The room's door swung open, and Officer Brian Hayes stepped in, his face grim. "Chloe, we've got intel. Surveillance footage from the warehouse district caught them celebrating." He paused, his voice bitter. "They recorded themselves attacking Max. They've uploaded it." Her stomach churned. "They posted it online?" Brian handed her his phone, the screen showing a grainy video. The footage displayed 5 Iron Serpents, their laughter echoing as they mocked Max and took turns striking him with chains. The sight of her brave partner, a dog trained to protect, a hero in his own right, reduced to their cruel entertainment, lit a fire within Chloe that threatened to consume her. "They've crossed a line," Brian said, "but Chief Wallace wants us to stand down. Says we need more evidence to make a move." Chloe's lips curled in disdain. "More evidence? They broadcast their crime. What more does he need?" Brian placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "You know how this works. Chiefs under pressure to keep things civil with the Serpents. They've got half the council in their pocket. Until we can connect them to the bigger operations, his hands are tied." "Fine," Chloe said, standing abruptly. Her sudden movement startled Brian. "If he won't act, I will." That evening, Chloe sat in her dimly lit home office, her laptop open to a file labeled Operation Iron Justice. She'd spent months gathering information on the Iron Serpent's activities. Drug trafficking, illegal arms deals, human trafficking. Their crimes painted a picture far darker than the town council wanted to admit. But now it was personal. They hadn't just attacked a police dog. They'd hurt her partner, her family. Max had saved her life more times than she could count. Now it was her turn to protect him. As she pieced together the next steps, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an old friend, Major Nathan Rourke, her former commanding officer from her military days. "Rourke, heard about Max. Let me know if you need backup. You're not alone in this." A faint smile tugged at Chloe's lips. Rourke and his team of veterans ran a private security and intelligence firm, one that operated on both sides of the law when necessary. They were exactly the kind of allies she needed. She typed back, "Chloe, I'll need intel on the Serpents, especially their leadership. Sending you files now." Moments later, Rourke replied, "Rourke, consider it done. We'll dig deep. Hang tight." Meanwhile, across town, the Iron Serpents gathered at their clubhouse, a dilapidated warehouse fortified with steel gates and surrounded by motorcycles. Inside, the gang's leader, Jackson Crusher Ward, reviewed their latest victory. "You see the views on this?" one of the bikers bragged, pointing to the video's climbing numbers online. "Everyone's talking about how we took down that mutt." Crusher smirked. "Let 'em talk. Fear is good for business. Let the cops try to push back now." One of the newer recruits, a wiry man named Ricky, spoke up hesitantly. Boss, you sure it's smart poking the hornet's nest? That handler. She looked ready to kill last night. Crusher's smirk faded, replaced by a glare. You scared of a cop? She's nothing. Just a chick with a badge. And that dog, he's done. We own this town. The others laughed, but Ricky's unease lingered. He'd heard stories about Chloe McAllister, about the things she'd done in the military before joining the force. He had a feeling Crusher's bravado was about to be tested. Back at the veterinary clinic, Chloe spent the night by Mac's side. As she gently stroked his fur, his eyes fluttered open briefly, and a soft whimper escaped him. It was a sound she'd never heard from her brave partner, a sound that broke her heart. She leaned in close, her voice a whisper. Rest up, buddy. I'll make this right. I promise. Max's eyes closed again, and for the first time in years, Chloe felt tears sting her eyes. But behind the sorrow was a burning resolve. The iron serpents thought they could terrorize the town with impunity. They thought they could hurt Max and walk away. They were wrong. Chloe didn't just want justice. She wanted retribution. The soft hum of fluorescent lights filled the sterile atmosphere of Silver Pine's animal clinic. Chloe sat in the corner of the examination room, her eyes fixed on Max as he lay sedated on the metal table. His chest rose and fell steadily, but the sight of his bandaged body and the cuts marring his golden coat sent fresh waves of anger coursing through her. Dr. Marion Spencer, the clinic's lead veterinarian, worked meticulously to clean Max's wounds. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and steady hands, but even she couldn't hide the tension in her expression. He's a fighter, Marion said, her voice calm but tinged with anger. But the damage is extensive, bruising, fractures, and lacerations. It'll take weeks of recovery. Chloe nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. Each injury on Max felt like a personal attack, a testament to the cruelty of the people she was up against. As Marion continued working, Officer Elena Cruz entered the room. She was a friend of Chloe's from the force, a seasoned detective who had seen her share of brutality. Tonight, though, even she seemed shaken. Chloe, Elena began, her voice low. We've arrested 3 of the bikers who were there. They're refusing to talk, but we've got footage from one of their phones. It's bad. Chloe's jaw tightened. Show me. Elena hesitated, then pulled out her tablet. The video showed Max bravely trying to protect Chloe during the ambush, his fierce growls and precise movements evident despite being outnumbered. Then came the moment Chloe dreaded, Max being struck repeatedly with chains and clubs, his yelps of pain piercing through the screen. Chloe's vision blurred with tears, but her resolve hardened. She looked up at Elena, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. I want everything we have on the Steel Vipers. Every member, every connection, every safe house. Elena shifted uneasily. Chloe, I know you're angry, but you can't go after them alone. They didn't just attack my partner, Chloe snapped, her voice trembling with emotion. They tried to send a message to every canine handler, every officer who stands in their way. This isn't just about Max, it's about stopping them from ever doing this again. Elena sighed but nodded. I'll do what I can, but Chloe, be careful. These guys don't play by the rules. That night, Chloe sat in her dimly lit apartment, surrounded by case files, maps, and notes. The faces of the Steel Vipers stared back at her from mugshots and surveillance photos. Their leader, Victor Viper Kane, was a former military contractor turned outlaw, a man known for his tactical expertise and ruthless demeanor. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't called in years. Captain Henry Langston. Langston had been her commanding officer during her time in the military, a man who understood the kind of resolve she needed now. Taking a deep breath, she dialed the number. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Langston here. Captain, it's Chloe Larson, she said. I need your help. The next morning, Langston arrived at the clinic, his presence as commanding as Chloe remembered. His silver hair and weathered face told the story of a man who had seen the worst of humanity and fought to overcome it. Chloe, he greeted, clasping her shoulder. What's the situation? She explained everything. The attack on Max, the Steel Vipers' growing influence, and the lack of accountability in the system that allowed them to thrive. Langston listened intently, his eyes narrowing as she recounted the details. Sounds like they need a wake-up call, Langston said. What's your plan? Chloe gestured to the array of files and maps spread out on the table. I've been tracking their movements. They've got a warehouse in the industrial district where they're storing weapons and running their operations. I need to hit them where it hurts. Langston frowned. That's a dangerous move. You'll need more than a good plan. You'll need a team. Chloe nodded. I've already called in a few favors. Some of the old crew from the 12th Battalion are willing to help. But I need your tactical expertise. Langston smiled faintly. You've got it. Let's make sure they never forget this lesson. That evening, Chloe met with her makeshift team at a secluded location outside town. Among them were Sergeant Mike Torres, a demolitions expert, Riley Nash, a communications specialist, and Alex Monroe, a sniper with a reputation for precision. Each had served with Chloe and Langston during their time in the military, and their loyalty to her was unwavering. Langston stepped forward, his voice firm. This isn't just about retaliation. It's about dismantling a network of violence and corruption. These men think they're untouchable because they operate in the shadows. Tonight, we shine a light on them. The group nodded, their resolve evident. Chloe outlined the plan, a coordinated strike on the Steel Viper's warehouse to recover stolen weapons and gather evidence that would bring their operation down. As they prepared their gear, Chloe took a moment to check on Max, who was resting in a secure kennel nearby. She knelt beside him, stroking his head gently. You're the bravest partner I've ever had, she whispered. This is for you. Max blinked up at her, his eyes full of trust. Chloe felt a surge of determination. The Steel Vipers had made a grave mistake, and they were about to pay for it. The abandoned industrial district loomed in the distance, its skeletal warehouses shrouded in shadows cast by the pale moonlight. The air was thick with tension as Chloe's team gathered at a vantage point overlooking the Steel Viper's warehouse. The structure stood as a fortress of illegal activity, its perimeter secured by armed guards and the flickering light of surveillance cameras. Chloe adjusted her tactical vest, her eyes scanning the building through a pair of binoculars. She counted at least a dozen guards patrolling the area, their movements methodical but not particularly disciplined. These were not seasoned professionals, but thugs emboldened by their numbers and the reputation of their gang. Langston joined her, his own binoculars trained on the site. They've got decent coverage, but it's sloppy. We'll exploit their blind spots, he said, pointing out gaps in their patrol routes. What's the plan for entry? Chloe unfolded a detailed blueprint of the warehouse. They've got two main entry points, the loading bay here, she said, tapping the map, and a side door near the office area. Riley will disable their cameras, giving us a 5-minute window to move in undetected. Langston nodded. And once inside, Mike sets the charges to disable their weapon stockpile. Alex and I will secure the evidence room and extract anything we can use to bring these guys down. Langston studied her face for a moment. And if it comes to a fight, Chloe's expression hardened. We finish it. No hesitation. Riley set up her equipment in a van parked a block away from the warehouse. The glow of her laptop screen illuminated her focused face as she hacked into the Steel Viper's surveillance system. Chloe sat beside her, monitoring the feed as Riley systematically shut down the cameras one by one. Camera loops are active, Riley announced. You've got a 5-minute window starting now. Understood, Chloe replied, switching to her comms. Team, move in. The group moved like shadows, their military training evident in their coordinated movements. Chloe and Alex led the way, approaching the side door while Langston and Mike headed for the loading bay. Riley remained in the van, feeding them updates on guard positions. At the side door, Chloe picked the lock with practiced ease, her heart pounding as the mechanism clicked open. She signaled Alex, and they slipped inside, their silenced weapons at the ready. The warehouse interior was dimly lit, its air thick with the smell of oil and metal. Crates labeled with cryptic codes were stacked high, some bearing the distinct markings of military surplus. Chloe felt a pang of anger. These weren't just stolen goods. They were tools of destruction meant for sale to the highest bidder. Meanwhile, Langston and Mike breached the loading bay, encountering two guards who were quickly subdued with precision strikes. Mike moved to the stack of weapon crates, his backpack filled with charges designed to disable the cache without causing a catastrophic explosion. As he worked, Langston kept watch, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows for any signs of movement. "How's it going, Mike?" "Almost done," Mike replied, securing the last charge. "2 more minutes." On the second floor, Chloe and Alex found the office area. Chloe opened the door to what appeared to be the Steel Viper's command center, a cluttered room filled with maps, ledgers, and laptops. She snapped photos of everything, ensuring they had a digital trail to follow. "Got something," Alex whispered, pulling a file from a drawer. He flipped through its contents, his brow furrowing. "This isn't just about guns. They're trafficking people, too." Chloe's stomach turned. "We're taking all of this," she said, shoving the files into her bag. "Every shred of evidence." Their comms crackled. It was Riley. "Guys, we've got a problem. The cameras just came back online. They've spotted you." The warehouse erupted in chaos. Alarms blared, and the Steel Vipers swarmed like angry hornets. Chloe and Alex took defensive positions as armed men charged up the stairs. "Langston, we're compromised," Chloe barked into her comms. "What's your status?" "Charges are set," Langston replied, the sound of gunfire punctuating his words. "Mike and I are heading for the exit. Get out of there, now." Chloe and Alex fought their way down the stairs, their silenced weapons now useless as the firefight drew attention from every corner of the building. Chloe's training kicked in, her movements precise and efficient as she neutralized one attacker after another. Outside, Langston and Mike provided cover fire, creating a path for Chloe and Alex to escape. As the team regrouped near the van, Mike pressed the detonator. The warehouse shook with a controlled explosion, its interior collapsing under the weight of its own destruction. Breathless but victorious, the team retreated to a safe house. Chloe collapsed onto a chair, her adrenaline finally subsiding as she processed the night's events. They had struck a significant blow, but the revelations about the Steel Viper's operations left her shaken. "This isn't over," Langston said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "But tonight, we made a difference." Chloe looked at Max, who rested nearby, his injuries healing, but his spirit unbroken. She nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. "We're just getting started." Chapter 5. Striking Back. The safe house was quiet except for the faint hum of the coffee machine in the corner. The air was thick with anticipation as Chloe's team gathered around the kitchen table, going over the spoils of their raid on the Steel Viper's warehouse. Files, hard drives, and photos were strewn across the surface, each piece a potential key to dismantling the gang's operations. Riley tapped furiously on her laptop, decrypting the files they had recovered. "This is big," she muttered, her eyes glued to the screen. "Really big. We've got weapons manifests, transaction records, even communication logs." Chloe leaned over her shoulder. "Anything that links them to higher-ups? Someone pulling the strings?" "Not yet, but give me time," Riley replied. "These files are encrypted for a reason. They're hiding something, and I'm going to find out what." Langston crossed his arms, his expression grim. "They'll retaliate. After what we pulled last night, they're not going to sit back and let us dismantle their operation." "They already know we're coming," Chloe said, her voice steady. "Let's make sure we stay one step ahead." That afternoon, Chloe paid a visit to Max at the temporary veterinary clinic Maria had set up in the safe house's garage. Max wagged his tail weakly when he saw her, his golden eyes full of trust and determination. "You're doing great, buddy," Chloe said, kneeling beside him. She stroked his head gently, her voice soft. "We're going to stop them. I promise." Maria entered, her face serious. "He's recovering well, but you need to be careful, Chloe. You're not just fighting thugs anymore. You're up against something much bigger." Chloe nodded. "I know. That's why I need to take them down, piece by piece." Maria hesitated, then placed a hand on Chloe's shoulder. "Just don't lose yourself in this." Max wouldn't want that. By evening, Riley had cracked a major piece of the puzzle. "Got it!" she exclaimed, her excitement drawing everyone to the table. "There's a pattern here. Shipments coming in through a port on the outskirts of the city. They're using a shell company to move weapons and other cargo." Chloe's jaw tightened. "Other cargo?" Riley hesitated, her excitement fading. human trafficking, women, children, and men, all being moved like commodities. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over them like a dark cloud. Langston broke the silence, his voice firm. Then we've got our next target. Chloe stood, her fists clenched. What do we know about the port? It's not heavily guarded, but it's got a lot of moving parts, Riley said, pulling up a satellite image. Security is focused on the main cargo areas, but they've got blind spots here and here. Mike pointed to the map. If we hit those blind spots, we can get in without raising alarms. Once we're inside, we split up. One team secures the hostages, the other neutralizes the cargo. Langston nodded. It's a solid plan, but we'll need speed and precision. This isn't just about stopping them, it's about saving lives. Hours later, the team approached the port under the cover of darkness. The air was thick with the smell of salt and diesel, and the distant sound of waves crashing against the docks provided a steady backdrop to their movements. Chloe led the team, her weapon drawn and her eyes scanning for threats. Riley stayed in the van, monitoring their progress through surveillance feeds and relaying information over their comms. Guards at the west entrance, Riley whispered. 2 of them. Looks like they're distracted. You've got an opening. Langston and Alex moved ahead, taking out the guards with silent precision. Chloe and Mike followed, slipping through the gate and into the maze of shipping containers that lined the port. Splitting up, Chloe said into her comms. Langston and Alex, take the cargo. Mike and I will secure the hostages. Copy that, Langston replied. Inside one of the warehouses, Chloe and Mike found the hostages, dozens of them, huddled together in a makeshift holding area. Their faces were etched with fear and exhaustion, but their eyes lit up with hope when they saw Chloe and Mike. We're here to help, Chloe said, her voice steady but soft. You're safe now. As Mike worked to unlock the doors, Chloe kept watch, her weapon trained on the entrance. Riley, we need extraction. How's the perimeter looking? Not great, Riley replied. I'm picking up movement. Reinforcements are on their way. Meanwhile, Langston and Alex reached the cargo area. They found crates filled with weapons, ammunition, and contraband, each one a testament to the Steel Viper's far-reaching network. Let's light this place up, Langston said, pulling out a detonator. Alex smirked. Gladly. The first explosion rocked the port, sending a plume of fire and smoke into the night sky. Chloe and Mike moved quickly, guiding the hostages toward the extraction point. Gunfire erupted as reinforcements arrived, but Langston and Alex provided cover, picking off enemies with deadly accuracy. Chloe, we're out of time, Riley warned. They've called for backup. You need to move now. We're almost there, Chloe replied, her voice calm despite the chaos. Keep the van ready. As the team and the hostages piled into the van, Riley floored the gas pedal, speeding away from the port just as another explosion lit up the sky. Chloe looked back, her chest heaving as she watched the Steel Viper's operation go up in flames. You did it, Maria said over the comms. You saved them. Chloe nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. This isn't over. Not until we've taken them all down. The sun was rising over the city as the team returned to the safe house. The rescued hostages were taken to a nearby sanctuary, where they received food, medical care, and assurances of safety. Though the mission had been a success, the atmosphere remained tense. Everyone knew this was just the beginning. Riley collapsed into a chair, rubbing her temples. I've been combing through the rest of their files. The operation at the port was just one piece of their empire. What else do you have? Langston asked, his tone sharp. Riley pulled up a map on her laptop. There's a nightclub in the city. Looks like it's one of their primary hubs for laundering money. It's owned by Victor Viper Kane. If we hit it, we'll disrupt their finances and cut off their cash flow. Chloe leaned forward. What kind of security are we looking at? High-end, Riley said. Cameras, armed guards, the works. It's not just a club, it's a fortress. Mike crossed his arms. If we go in guns blazing, we'll be walking into a death trap. Langston nodded. Then we don't go in loud, we go in smart. The team spent the rest of the day planning the operation. Riley hacked into the club's security system, mapping out entrances, exits, and patrol routes. Chloe and Langston devised a strategy, a combination of stealth and sabotage to neutralize the guards and disable the club's defenses. As night fell, they geared up and prepared to move. Chloe checked her equipment one last time, her thoughts briefly drifting to Max, who was resting comfortably under Maria's care. Langston placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He's strong, Chloe, just like his handler." She smiled faintly. "Let's make sure he has a world worth fighting for when this is over." The nightclub pulsed with life, its neon lights and thundering music masking the darkness that lay beneath its surface. Chloe, dressed in civilian clothes to blend in, entered through the front door, a hidden earpiece linking her to the team. "I'm in," she whispered. Langston and Mike entered through the back, posing as delivery workers. Alex took up a sniper position on a rooftop across the street, his rifle trained on the club's entrances. Riley monitored the operation from the van, feeding real-time updates to the team. "Guards ahead, 2 o'clock, Riley said. "Chloe, you're clear to move." She navigated through the crowd, her eyes scanning for threats. In the VIP section, she spotted Kane, lounging on a leather couch surrounded by his cronies. His sharp features and cold eyes exuded an air of arrogance that made her blood boil. "Target located," she murmured. Langston's voice came through the comms. "Good. Stay in position. We're moving to disable the security system." In the back office, Langston and Mike worked quickly to cut the power to the cameras. Riley guided them through the process, her voice steady despite the tension. "Okay, you've got 30 seconds before the backup system kicks in," she warned. "Plenty of time," Mike said, smirking as he clipped the final wire. With the cameras down, Chloe made her move. She slipped past the guards and into the VIP section, her movements precise and deliberate. Kane didn't notice her until she was standing right in front of him. Well, he said, a sly grin spreading across his face. "What brings you here, Officer Larson?" Chloe didn't flinch. "Just came to see the man behind the mess." Kane chuckled, leaning back in his seat. "Bold of you to walk into my club. You must know how this ends." "That's the thing about arrogance," Chloe said, her voice ice cold. "It blinds you to the obvious." Before Kane could react, Chloe pulled a stun baton from her jacket and struck him, sending him sprawling to the floor. His guards lunged toward her, but Langston and Mike burst in through the back, taking them down with swift precision. The nightclub erupted into chaos as the team secured Kane and began gathering evidence. Riley's voice crackled through the comms. "Heads up, guys, reinforcements are inbound. Looks like a dozen bikers." "On it," Alex replied, his sniper rifle firing with deadly accuracy. Each shot picked off an approaching biker, buying the team precious time. "Let's move," Langston barked, dragging Kane toward the exit. Chloe covered their retreat, her movements precise and unyielding. As they reached the van, Riley gunned the engine, speeding away just as the first wave of reinforcements reached the club. Back at the safe house, Kane was restrained and seated in a dimly lit room. His cocky demeanor had faded, replaced by a simmering anger. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "This changes nothing." Chloe stepped forward, her gaze piercing. "You've already lost, Kane. Your empire is crumbling, and you're going to help us finish the job." He laughed bitterly. "You don't scare me. You have no idea how deep this goes." "Then start talking," Chloe said, her voice cold. "Because the deeper it goes, the harder we're going to hit." Victor Kane glared at Chloe, his face twisted with disdain. His wrists were bound to the chair, and sweat glistened on his brow under the room's dim light. Despite his precarious situation, his voice carried defiance. "You think you're the first to try this?" Kane sneered. "I've seen bigger operations than yours crumble." Chloe leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. Her calm exterior masked the fury simmering beneath. "We're not like the others," she said evenly. "We don't make deals, and we don't back down." Langston stood in the corner, arms folded, his sharp eyes assessing Kane's every twitch. "Victor," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "you have two choices. Cooperate and maybe get out of this alive, or hold out and watch as we dismantle everything you've built." Kane barked a bitter laugh. "You don't scare me. You don't know what you're up against." Langston stepped closer, his tone growing colder. We just shut down one of your primary operations and took you out of your own fortress. You're not in control anymore. Chloe approached the table, her eyes locked on Kane's. Let me make this simple for you, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. We already have enough to bury you. What we're after now is everyone else involved, the suppliers, the buyers, the dirty officials protecting you. You can help us or you can go down with them. In the next room, Riley worked on decrypting the files they'd extracted from the nightclub. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her brow furrowed in concentration. Alex and Mike stood nearby, their focus split between the monitors and the occasional glance toward the interrogation room. Got something, Riley announced, her voice breaking the silence. It's a ledger. Payments, shipments, contacts. Looks like Kane's operation spans multiple cities. He's been moving weapons, drugs, and even people. Alex's jaw tightened. How many lives has this guy ruined? Too many, Riley replied. But this is our chance to shut it all down. She tapped a key and a map appeared on the screen, marked with red dots. These are their key locations: warehouses, safe houses, meeting spots. If we hit these, we'll cripple their network. Back in the interrogation room, Kane's defiance began to waver. Chloe's relentless questioning and Langston's silent, imposing presence chipped away at his bravado. You're wasting your time, Kane muttered. Even if you take me out, there's someone else waiting to fill my shoes. That may be, Chloe said, leaning closer. But they won't have your contacts or your resources, and they'll know we're coming for them. Kane stared at her, his jaw clenched. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Langston pulled a chair over and sat across from him. Here's the deal, Victor. We're giving you a lifeline. You give us names, locations, and anything else we can use, and maybe, just maybe, you won't end up spending the rest of your life rotting in a federal prison. Kane hesitated, his mind racing. He glanced at Chloe, then Langston, then the door. The realization set in. There was no escape. He sighed heavily. Fine, but if I talk, you have to protect me. If they find out I spilled, I'm a dead man. Chloe exchanged a glance with Langston. We'll see what you give us first. Hours later, Kane had provided enough intel to confirm much of what Riley had found in the files. He spoke of a sprawling network of corruption, with powerful figures pulling strings from behind the scenes. There's a meeting tomorrow night, Kane said, his voice hoarse from hours of talking. They're finalizing a major deal, guns and drugs, big money. It's happening at an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. Who's going to be there? Langston pressed. Buyers, suppliers, enforcers, Kane replied. And someone from the top, someone big. Names, Chloe demanded. Kane hesitated, then relented. The buyers are tied to a cartel. The suppliers, let's just say they have military connections. And the big shot? His name's Quentin Rourke, former general. He's the one running the whole operation. The room went silent. Chloe's stomach churned at the mention of Rourke. His name had surfaced before during her military service, always whispered in the context of illicit arms deals and unspeakable violence. If Rourke's there, Langston said grimly, this isn't just another bust. This is a war. The team reconvened in the main room, the weight of Kane's revelations heavy in the air. Riley pulled up the factory's blueprints, outlining the layout and security measures. This is going to be tough, she said. They've got lookouts, surveillance, and armed guards covering every angle. We'll need to split into 2 teams, Langston said. One to secure the perimeter and neutralize the guards, the other to infiltrate and gather evidence. Chloe nodded. This is our chance to take down the entire operation. We can't afford to miss. As they finalized their plan, Chloe's thoughts turned to Max. She thought of his bravery, his loyalty, and the pain he had endured. She thought of the people whose lives would be saved by bringing Rourke and his network to justice. This ends tomorrow, she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. For Max and for everyone else they've hurt. The next night, the team prepared to move. Chloe double-checked her gear, her hands steady despite the storm of emotions within her. Langston stood beside her, his expression unreadable. You ready for this? He asked. I've been ready since the moment they hurt Max, she replied. Langston nodded. Then let's finish this. As the team headed out into the night, the abandoned factory loomed in the distance. Inside, secrets waited to be uncovered, and justice waited to be delivered. The factory loomed in the distance, its decaying structure shrouded in darkness. The faint hum of a generator and occasional flashes of light from the guards' flashlights gave the abandoned building a deceptively calm appearance. But Chloe knew better. This place was a hive of criminal activity, a fortress for Rourke's operation. Chloe adjusted her comms gear as the team took their positions. Langston's voice came through her earpiece. "Team Alpha, report." "Perimeter secured," Alex replied from his sniper perch atop a nearby crane. "I've got eyes on 4 guards near the east entrance and 2 more patrolling the southern perimeter." "Team Bravo, moving to infiltration point," Riley whispered. She and Mike were crouched near a rusted drainage pipe that led into the factory's basement. Chloe crouched beside Langston near the factory's north side, hidden behind a stack of rotting wooden pallets. Max, wearing his tactical harness, was at her side. Though his injuries had healed, she still felt a pang of worry every time he moved. "Chloe," Langston said softly, "you sure about bringing Max in?" "He's ready," Chloe replied firmly, scratching behind Max's ears. "And I trust him more than anyone." Langston nodded. "Then let's make this count." Inside the factory, the air was thick with tension. A labyrinth of hallways led to the central chamber, where the meeting was taking place. Chloe's heart pounded as she and Langston crept through the shadows, Max moving silently at her side. They communicated with hand signals, their movements practiced and precise. Riley's voice came through the comms. "We're in, planting surveillance now." "Good," Langston replied. "Alex, status?" "2 guards down," Alex reported. "No alarms. Moving to cover the west side." Chloe and Langston reached the central chamber's outer wall. Peering through a broken window, they saw the scene unfold. Rourke stood at the center of a long metal table, flanked by 2 men in suits. Several other figures sat around the table: cartel representatives, suppliers, and enforcers. Crates of weapons and duffel bags filled with cash lined the walls. Rourke's voice carried over the hum of the generator. "This deal solidifies our position. No one interferes with our supply chain. Not law enforcement, not rival gangs, no one." The room murmured with approval. Langston leaned closer to Chloe, his voice barely audible. "We need to document this." "Riley, are you getting this crystal clear?" Riley replied, "Recording audio and video." Suddenly, Max's ears perked up. Chloe followed his gaze and spotted a shadow moving toward their position. A lone guard, armed and alert, was heading directly for them. "Langston," she whispered, "we've got company." Langston drew his knife and motioned for Chloe to stay put. But before he could act, Max moved. Silent and swift, the Belgian Malinois darted toward the guard. With a precision born of years of training, Max knocked the weapon from the guard's hands and pinned him to the ground. The guard let out a muffled yelp before Langston silenced him with a quick strike. Chloe knelt beside Max, stroking his fur. "Good boy," she whispered. Langston gave a small nod of approval. "He's better than ever." Inside the chamber, the meeting escalated. One of the cartel representatives slammed his hand on the table. "We've heard rumors. Law enforcement getting too close. We need assurances this operation is secure." Rourke smirked. "My assurances are your profits. Look around. Do you see any interruptions?" As if on cue, a distant crack echoed through the factory, the sound of Alex's sniper rifle. The room froze. Seconds later, the lights flickered, and the hum of the generator sputtered. Riley's voice came through the comms. "Surveillance scrambled. They're blind. Move!" Langston ordered. Chloe and Max entered the chamber first, their weapons drawn. "Everyone, hands where I can see them!" she shouted. The room erupted into chaos. Rourke's men reached for their weapons. But Langston and Mike entered from the opposite side, creating a crossfire. Riley worked from the shadows, disabling escape routes and cutting off communications. Max leapt into action, targeting one of the enforcers who tried to flee. His training was flawless, his movements fluid as he brought the man down without hesitation. Rourke grabbed a handgun from the table and aimed at Chloe. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he roared. Chloe fired first, her bullet striking the weapon from his hand. "Drop it, Rourke. It's over." But Rourke wasn't finished. With surprising speed, he lunged for a hidden panel on the wall. Before Chloe could react, the floor beneath her trembled. A hidden door slid open, revealing a tunnel. "He's escaping!" Langston shouted. Chloe and Max bolted after Rourke, their boots pounding against the metal floor. The tunnel twisted and turned, its dim lighting making it difficult to see. Max's instincts guided them, his nose tracking Rourke's scent with unerring accuracy. Back in the chamber, Langston and the rest of the team subdued the remaining criminals. Riley accessed the cartel's encrypted files, while Alex provided cover from above. "We've got everything," Riley said, her voice triumphant. "Evidence, names, locations. This will dismantle their entire network." "Good," Langston replied, but his focus was on the tunnel. "Chloe, what's your status?" Her voice crackled through the comms. "In pursuit. He's not getting away." The tunnel opened into an underground dock where a speedboat waited. Rourke was already aboard, the engine roaring to life. Chloe didn't hesitate. She and Max sprinted onto the dock as Rourke's boat pulled away. Max growled, his muscles tensed as if ready to leap into the water. "No, Max," Chloe said, her voice steady. "We'll catch him." She scanned the dock and spotted another boat, a small, battered vessel, but functional. She jumped in, firing up the engine as Max hopped aboard. The chase was on. The speedboat cut through the water, its wake spraying high into the night air. Rourke glanced over his shoulder, his face twisted with frustration as Chloe's boat gained on him. "Give it up, Rourke," Chloe shouted, her voice carried by the wind. "You're done!" Rourke responded with gunfire, the bullets splashing into the water around her. Chloe swerved, keeping low as she closed the distance. Max barked, his sharp eyes fixed on their target. Chloe reached for her sidearm, steadying herself as she aimed. She fired, the bullet striking the engine of Rourke's boat. Smoke erupted, and the speedboat slowed to a crawl. With one final burst of speed, Chloe's boat rammed into Rourke's, sending him sprawling. Max leapt onto the deck, pinning Rourke before he could reach for his weapon. Chloe followed, her weapon trained on him. "It's over, Rourke." Rourke stared up at her, his defiance flickering into resignation. "You don't know what you've started," he muttered. "Maybe not," Chloe replied, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. "But I know how it's going to end." Back at the factory, the team regrouped as federal agents swarmed the scene. The evidence Riley had gathered, combined with Rourke's capture, was more than enough to dismantle the operation. Langston approached Chloe, his expression a mix of pride and relief. "You did it." "We did it," Chloe corrected, glancing at Max. "All of us." Max wagged his tail, his golden coat shimmering under the factory's harsh lights. Despite everything, he stood tall, a testament to resilience, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between Handler and Canine. The sun was just starting to rise over the horizon when Chloe, Langston, and the rest of the team arrived back at the Silver Pines precinct. The once chaotic energy of the night began to ebb, replaced by a solemn determination. The evidence, arrests, and the takedown of Rourke had set the stage for what Chloe hoped would be the end of the Steel Viper's reign of terror. Max trotted beside her, his steps steady but deliberate. Despite the exhaustion evident in his eyes, he carried himself like the warrior he was, a partner who had seen Chloe through the darkest hours of her life. The precinct was abuzz with activity. Detectives, federal agents, and analysts pored over the evidence Riley had retrieved. Stolen weapons, financial records, and a web of encrypted communications painted a damning picture of the Steel Viper's extensive operations. Langston stood near the evidence room, his arms crossed as he observed the chaos. When Chloe approached, he gave her a nod. "This is big, Chloe, bigger than any of us imagined." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's not just about the Steel Vipers. Rourke was connected to a network, arms dealers, corrupt officials, maybe even international players. Taking him down is only the first step." Langston's expression turned grim. "If he's the tip of the iceberg, the rest of it won't go down without a fight." Inside the precinct's interrogation room, Rourke sat shackled to the table, his face a mask of defiance. Chloe entered, followed by Detective Elena Cruz, who carried a thick file of evidence. Max sat by the door, his unwavering gaze fixed on Rourke. "You've got nothing," Rourke sneered as Chloe placed the file on the table. "Even if you arrest me, Someone else will take my place. Chloe leaned forward, her voice low and controlled. You're right about one thing. There's a lot more to this than just you. But make no mistake, we're not stopping here. Every name, every connection, every deal you made is coming to light. Rourke's smirk faltered for a brief moment. You don't scare me. Chloe's lips curled into a faint smile. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm giving you a choice. Cooperate, and maybe you'll see the outside of a cell one day. Or don't, and we'll make sure you're the first domino to fall. Rourke didn't respond, but his silence spoke volumes. Chloe left the room, her steps heavy but determined. As the hours stretched into the afternoon, Chloe finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She sat outside the precinct on the front steps, the crisp morning air offering a brief reprieve. Max rested his head on her lap, his eyes half closed in contentment. Elena joined her, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. Heard you gave Rourke an ultimatum. Chloe took a sip, savoring the warmth. He's too proud to talk right now, but once he realizes how isolated he is, he'll crack. Elena nodded. This is going to be a long process. You up for it? Chloe glanced at Max, her hand absently stroking his fur. After everything we've been through, there's no turning back. That evening, Chloe returned to the clinic to check on Maria Santos, the veterinarian who had cared for Max. Maria greeted her with a warm smile as she cleaned up the examination room. You both look like you've been through a war, Maria said, gesturing for Chloe to sit. We have, Chloe replied, sinking into a chair. But it's not over yet. Maria knelt beside Max, checking his paws and inspecting the tactical harness he still wore. He's remarkable, Maria said, her voice filled with admiration. What he's endured, what he's overcome, it's nothing short of extraordinary. Chloe nodded, her throat tight. I don't know what I'd do without him. Maria smiled softly. You won't have to. He's as loyal as they come. Just make sure you give yourself time to heal too, Chloe. Max isn't the only one carrying scars. Over the next few days, the fallout from the Steel Vipers' takedown began to ripple through the community. Local news outlets ran stories of the raid, the arrests, and the heroism of the team that brought them down. Chloe and Max became the focus of public attention, a symbol of resilience and justice in a town that had been gripped by fear. Despite the accolades, Chloe remained focused on the task at hand. She spent hours working with Riley to trace the digital breadcrumbs left behind by Rourke's operation. Each piece of evidence led to new revelations. Bank accounts tied to offshore havens, shell companies used to launder money, and encrypted messages hinting at larger players involved. Langston and Alex worked with federal agents to coordinate a series of raids on affiliated safe houses and storage facilities. Each successful operation brought them closer to dismantling the network entirely. One evening, Chloe sat at her desk, poring over a map marked with red and blue pins. Max lay at her feet, his ears twitching as he dozed. Langston entered the room, carrying a folder filled with fresh intelligence. Got something for you, Langston said, placing the folder on the desk. Surveillance on Rourke's second-in-command. He's holed up in a cabin about 20 miles outside town. Chloe's eyes narrowed as she studied the photos and reports. He's our best chance at getting to the higher-ups. Langston crossed his arms. Then we move fast. If he slips through our fingers, we lose our edge. Chloe glanced at Max, who was now wide awake, his ears perked up as if sensing her determination. We'll get him, she said, her voice firm, no matter what it takes. As the team prepared for the next mission, Chloe felt the weight of everything they had accomplished and everything that still lay ahead. The fight was far from over, but with Max by her side, she knew they could face whatever came next. The moon hung low in the sky as Chloe and her team sped along the winding back roads, their convoy of black SUVs kicking up clouds of dust. Riley had been monitoring the movements of Rourke's second-in-command, a man named Andre Sledge Marcus, whose tactical brilliance and brutal reputation had made him a key player in the Steel Vipers hierarchy. Thermal drones have confirmed the cabin's occupied, Riley's voice crackled to roar through the radio. 4 guards outside, more inside. Andre hasn't moved in the last 3 hours. Langston, seated in the lead vehicle, gave a curt nod. Standard extraction. Hit hard, hit fast. Chloe, you and Max take the perimeter. Alex, you cover us from high ground. Everyone else, breach on my mark. Chloe adjusted Max's tactical vest, running her fingers over the patches she'd carefully sewn on, the scars of previous battles now symbols of their unbreakable bond. Ready, partner? She whispered. Max let out a low bark, his tail wagging with controlled excitement. Chloe smiled, her resolve stealing as they approached the target. The convoy came to a stop half a mile from the cabin, the team moving quickly and silently through the dense woods. The faint glow of the cabin's lights pierced the darkness, the silhouettes of armed guards visible near the porch. Langston raised his hand, signaling the team to split into their assigned positions. Chloe and Max veered left, circling the perimeter to cut off any potential escape routes. Max moved with military precision, his nose low to the ground as he tracked unfamiliar scents. Eyes on the guards, Alex's voice came through the comms. "Snipers ready." "Copy that," Langston replied. "Breach in 3, 2, 1. The first explosion shattered the stillness, sending the guards scrambling as the team stormed the cabin. Chloe and Max darted through the trees, intercepting a fleeing figure. Max lunged, his powerful jaws clamping onto the man's arm as Chloe closed in, securing him with zip ties. "Don't move," she ordered, her voice cold and commanding. Inside the cabin, chaos erupted as the team neutralized the guards. Langston and Riley moved swiftly, clearing room after room until they reached the basement door. A faint beeping sound emanated from behind it, a warning of a potential trap. "Careful," Langston muttered, motioning for Riley to scan for devices. "Got it," Riley replied, her tablet lighting up with a schematic of the room. "Motion-triggered explosives. Give me 30 seconds." As Riley worked to disable the bomb, Chloe entered the cabin with Max, her weapon raised. She found Andre Marcus in the corner of the basement, his hands raised in surrender, a smug grin on his face. "You've got guts coming here," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "But you're playing a dangerous game." Chloe leveled her gaze at him, unfazed. "You're going to tell us everything about Rourke's network, the suppliers, the buyers, the offshore accounts, or you'll rot in a cell for the rest of your life." Andre chuckled, shaking his head. "You think this ends with me? You don't know the half of it." "We will," Chloe shot back, "and you're going to help us." Max growled low in his throat, his sharp eyes locked on Andre. The sight of the imposing dog seemed to chip away at Andre's bravado. He swallowed hard, his gaze darting to the armed agents surrounding him. Back at the precinct, Andre was placed in an interrogation room. Chloe stood on the other side of the glass, watching as Langston and Elena questioned him. He was resistant at first, spouting defiance and smug remarks, but the weight of the evidence and the realization of how thoroughly his operation had been dismantled began to break him down. "He's close to cracking," Langston said as he joined Chloe in the observation room. "But he knows too much to let go without a fight." Chloe crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "We don't need him to talk. Riley's already pulling everything from his encrypted devices. It's only a matter of time before we piece it all together." "Still," Langston said, "anything he gives us now could save lives. We can't afford to leave any stone unturned." Chloe nodded, her resolve unwavering. "We'll get what we need." As the team continued their efforts, Max became a symbol of inspiration within the precinct. Officers who had initially doubted Chloe's methods now marveled at Max's intelligence and dedication. His presence brought a renewed sense of purpose to a department that had been overshadowed by corruption and fear. One evening, as Chloe prepared to leave the precinct, a young officer approached her, holding a framed photo of Max. "Ma'am," he said, his voice tentative, "I wanted to give you this. It's from the night we took down Rourke. Max, he's a hero." Chloe accepted the photo, her throat tightening as she looked at the image of Max standing tall amidst the chaos, his eyes fierce and determined. "Thank you," she said softly. "He is." The following weeks were a whirlwind of progress. Andre's devices revealed connections to international arms dealers, corrupt officials, and even high-ranking figures within law enforcement. Each revelation brought them closer to dismantling the entire network. But with progress came danger. Chloe received a chilling message one night, a photo of her and Max, taken from the shadows outside her apartment. The caption read, "You can't protect him forever." Her blood ran cold, but she refused to let fear control her. Instead, she doubled down, working tirelessly with her team to expose every player in the Steel Vipers operation. Max, as always, stayed by her side, his unwavering loyalty a source of strength. Together they were unstoppable, a force of justice against the darkness that sought to consume their town. As the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Chloe knew they were closing in on the endgame. The Steel Vipers' empire was crumbling, and the shadowy figures who had orchestrated their rise were being dragged into the light. But she also knew that the most dangerous fight was still ahead. The precinct was quieter than usual that evening. A sense of anticipation hung in the air as Chloe and her team pored over the data they'd extracted from Andre's devices. The scope of the Steel Vipers operation was staggering. Arms smuggling, human trafficking, drug distribution, and a sprawling network of corrupt officials shielding them from justice. Riley's voice broke the silence. "Chloe, you're going to want to see this." She swiveled her monitor around, revealing a series of encrypted bank accounts linked to Victor Rourke himself. These accounts trace back to offshore havens, payments going to private contractors, bribes to politicians, and... Wait, Riley's face darkened. There's a payout scheduled for tonight. High-dollar transfer to someone flagged as a fixer. Chloe leaned over the screen. "Who's the recipient?" "Name's redacted," Riley replied. "But this kind of money only moves for a reason. They're either covering their tracks or setting something big in motion." Langston, who had been monitoring tactical plans, stepped forward. "We need to move on this now. If they're bringing in a fixer, it means they know we're getting too close." As the team strategized their next move, Chloe's phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Elena. "Chloe, we've got a problem. One of our undercover officers, Chris Lyle, has gone dark. He was last seen near the docks. Intel suggests Rourke's people are using the area to stage something big." Chloe's chest tightened. Chris was a good officer, dedicated and brave. If he was in trouble, there wasn't much time to waste. "I'll head to the docks with Max," Chloe said, grabbing her gear. "Langston, can you hold down the fort here?" Langston nodded. "We'll keep pushing on Andre and monitoring Rourke's accounts. Be careful out there, Chloe." The docks were shrouded in fog, the air thick with the smell of salt water and diesel. Chloe moved cautiously, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. Max was at her side, his ears perked and his nose sniffing the air for signs of danger. Suddenly, Max stopped, his body tense. He growled low in his throat and fixed his gaze on a nearby warehouse. Chloe followed his lead, her heart pounding as she approached the building. Inside, the faint sound of muffled voices grew louder. Chloe pressed her back against the wall, signaling for Max to stay low. She peeked through a broken window, spotting Chris Lyle tied to a chair in the center of the room. 4 armed men surrounded him, their voices harsh and menacing. "You've got guts infiltrating our crew," one of them sneered. "Too bad you're not going to live long enough to regret it." Chloe gritted her teeth, her mind racing. She couldn't risk waiting for backup. Chris didn't have that kind of time. She tapped her earpiece. "Riley, I need a live feed of the warehouse. Can you hack into nearby security cameras?" "Already on it," Riley replied. After a brief pause, she added, "Got eyes. There's a side entrance to your left. 2 more guards outside, patrolling. I'll guide you." Moving swiftly and silently, Chloe dispatched the 2 guards outside with precise strikes, Max ensuring they stayed down. Once inside, she crept along the shadows, positioning herself near the group surrounding Chris. Max crouched beside her, his sharp eyes locked on her signal. "Now," Chloe whispered. Max bolted forward, his growl echoing through the warehouse as he lunged at one of the men, knocking him to the ground. The remaining 3 spun around, their weapons raised. But Chloe was faster. She fired, disabling 2 of them with pinpoint accuracy before tackling the last one to the ground. Chris looked up, his eyes wide with relief. "Chloe, how did you—" "Later," Chloe said, cutting his bindings. "Can you walk?" Chris nodded, though he winced as he stood. "Yeah, I'm good." They didn't get the chance to do much. "Good," Chloe replied. "Let's get out of here before more show up." As they exited the warehouse, the faint sound of approaching motorcycles sent a chill down Chloe's spine. Max growled, his body tensing as the roar grew louder. "Go," Chloe urged Chris, handing him a spare weapon. Get back to the precinct. I'll cover you. Chris hesitated. Chloe, now, she barked. Chris nodded reluctantly and took off towards safety as Chloe and Max held their ground. The Steel Vipers arrived in force, their headlights cutting through the fog as they encircled the warehouse. Victor Rourke stepped off the lead bike, his imposing figure framed by the beams of light. He clapped slowly, his voice carrying a mocking tone. Impressive, Officer Larson. You're as relentless as they say. Chloe raised her weapon, keeping it trained on him. And you're as predictable as I expected. Surrender now, and maybe the judge will go easy on you. Rourke laughed, his menacing grin widening. Oh, Chloe, this isn't how it ends. You think you've won? You're just scratching the surface, Max growled beside her, his stance unwavering. Chloe's finger tightened on the trigger. Call off your men, Rourke. This is your last chance. Rourke's eyes narrowed, and for a moment the air was heavy with tension. Then he smirked. Take her. The fight erupted in an instant. Chloe fired, her shots precise as she took down several bikers. Max moved like lightning, his powerful jaws and sharp instincts keeping her flanks protected. The Steel Vipers weren't just thugs. They were organized, trained, and ruthless. But Chloe and Max were a team forged in fire, and they fought with the kind of synchronicity that couldn't be taught. The battle raged on until the sound of sirens filled the air. Langston and Elena arrived with reinforcements, overwhelming the Steel Vipers and forcing Rourke to retreat into the shadows once more. As the dust settled, Chloe knelt beside Max, checking him for injuries. He licked her face, his tail wagging slightly despite the exhaustion in his eyes. You did good, partner, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. We're not done yet, but we're getting closer. Langston approached, his expression grim. Rourke got away, but we've got his men and his operations cornered. He's running out of places to hide. Chloe nodded, her determination burning brighter than ever. We'll find him. He won't get away with this. Victor Rourke stood in the shadows of an abandoned mansion on the outskirts of the city, nursing a drink as he listened to the chaos unfolding through his burner phone. His men had failed him at the docks, their operation exposed and compromised. Worse, Chloe Larson was proving to be an opponent far more formidable than he'd anticipated. She's relentless, growled Andre, now wearing a bandage across his brow from the earlier encounter. Half our crew's been taken out or flipped. Victor slammed his glass down on the dusty table, the sound echoing through the empty room. You think I don't know that? He snarled. Larson isn't just a cop. She's a goddamn problem. What's the play, boss? Andre asked cautiously. The docks are done. Our safe houses are burned. We've got the fixer waiting for instructions, but Victor's lips curled into a sinister grin. The fixer isn't here to save us. He's here to end her. She's made this personal, and that's her weakness. Back at the precinct, Chloe sat at her desk, poring over maps and intelligence reports. Every move Rourke made seemed designed to cover his tracks, but each step also left a breadcrumb. Riley entered, holding a tablet. You're going to want to see this, Riley said, her tone grave. She played a video that had been leaked online. It was a recording of Rourke addressing his remaining men, his voice dripping with venom. They think they can take us down? They think their justice matters in a world built on power? Let's show them what happens when they mess with the Steel Vipers. Go after everything she loves. Her allies, her precinct, her home. Burn it all. Chloe's stomach twisted, but her face remained calm. He's getting desperate. Langston stepped in, his expression equally grim. Desperate men are dangerous, Chloe. He's trying to break you. Let him try, she replied. We've got him cornered. He knows it. Riley scrolled through more data. We've intercepted chatter about a meeting between Rourke and someone called the Fixer. High-end mercenary. They're planning something big, something designed to take you out for good. Chloe's gaze hardened. Then we hit them first. Langston and the team worked quickly to analyze the data, identifying the likely meeting location, an abandoned industrial complex on the city's outskirts. The site was sprawling and filled with potential ambush points. Chloe knew it would be dangerous, but she also knew she couldn't hesitate. This is our chance, Langston said as they reviewed the blueprints. But it won't be easy. The Fixer's reputation is intimidating. Chloe nodded. We stick to the plan. Riley, keep our comms live and monitor their movements. Langston, you and Torres take the north perimeter. Alex and I will move in from the south with Max. The team nodded, their resolve unshaken. They knew what was at stake. Night fell, shrouding the industrial complex in shadows. Chloe and Max moved silently through the overgrown pathways, her grip firm on her rifle. Max's nose twitched as he sniffed the air, his body low and alert. Ahead, faint voices echoed through the complex. Chloe raised her hand, signaling for Max to stop. She crouched behind a rusted container, peering through her scope. There they were, Victor Rourke, Andre, and a third man she didn't recognize. The Fixer. He was tall and lean, with a predatory air about him. His movements were precise, his eyes cold and calculating. He carried himself like a man who had seen and caused more death than most could imagine. "We'll draw her out," the Fixer said, his voice a low growl. "And when she shows, I'll end this, quickly." Rourke smirked. "You'd better. I've invested too much to let one woman destroy it all." Chloe's earpiece crackled softly as Riley's voice came through. "You're in position. Langston's team has eyes on the north. No sign of reinforcements yet." "Copy," Chloe whispered. "Hold position. We wait for the right moment." Max's ears perked, his body stiffening. Chloe followed his gaze and spotted a group of armed guards patrolling the area. The Fixer had come prepared. She tapped her earpiece. "Riley, confirm the guard count." 10 outside, heavily armed," Riley replied. 2 more with Rourke and the Fixer. Chloe took a deep breath. The odds weren't ideal, but they never were. "Langston, Torres, move in on my mark. Riley, jam their comms when I give the signal." She glanced at Max, who was watching her intently. "Ready, boy?" Max's quiet growl was all the confirmation she needed. The ambush began with precision. Langston and Torres took out 2 guards on the north perimeter with silenced weapons, their bodies dropping silently into the grass. Chloe and Alex moved in from the south, neutralizing 2 more before they could sound the alarm. Riley's voice crackled. Comms jammed. "They're blind." Chloe pushed forward, her heart pounding as she closed in on the central area. Rourke and the Fixer were still there, unaware of the chaos unfolding around them. Max led the way, his nose guiding them through the labyrinth of containers and debris. As they reached the final stretch, one of the guards stumbled upon Langston's position, shouting a warning before he was subdued. The Fixer's head snapped up, his hand immediately reaching for his weapon. "They're here," he growled. Rourke cursed, drawing his pistol. "Find her. Kill her." The Fixer moved with lethal efficiency, barking orders to the remaining guards. The element of surprise was gone, and the fight was on. Chloe and Max burst into the clearing, her rifle raised. Shots rang out as she took cover behind a stack of crates. Max lunged at one of the guards, his powerful jaws clamping down and disarming the man with ease. "Chloe, on your right!" Langston shouted over the comms. She pivoted, firing a precise shot that took down an approaching guard. The Fixer moved like a ghost, his shots narrowly missing her as he advanced. He was good, better than anyone she'd faced before. But Chloe had Max. As the Fixer closed in, Max leapt from the shadows, knocking him to the ground. The Fixer fought back, his strength surprising. But Max's training and determination were unmatched. Chloe moved in, her weapon trained on the struggling man. "Call them off, Rourke," she shouted. Rourke hesitated, his face twisted with anger and fear. Before he could respond, Alex's sniper shot rang out, disarming him. The weapon clattered to the ground, and Rourke raised his hands in surrender. The Fixer stopped struggling, realizing the fight was over. Chloe motioned for Max to step back, keeping her weapon steady. "It's done," she said, her voice cold. "You're finished." As the team secured the area and apprehended Rourke and his men, Chloe knelt beside Max, who was panting but uninjured. She scratched behind his ears, her voice soft. "You're incredible. You know that." Max wagged his tail, his eyes filled with loyalty and pride. Langston approached, a rare smile on his face. "You did it, Chloe. You took them down." Chloe nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "We did it, but this isn't over. There's still more out there. More corruption, more danger." Langston placed a hand on her shoulder. Then we'll face it. Together. The following morning dawned gray and cold as Chloe walked into the precinct, flanked by Langston and Riley. They had spent the night securing the crime scene and ensuring Victor Rourke and the fixer were transported to a maximum security holding facility. The weight of the previous night's events hung heavy in the air, but Chloe felt something new hope. Max trotted alongside her, his wounds healing, his spirit as strong as ever. Officers throughout the precinct gave her nods of respect as she passed, their expressions a mix of awe and gratitude. The Steel Viper's reign of terror had finally been brought to its knees. But Chloe knew this was just the beginning. In the interrogation room, Victor Rourke sat with his hands cuffed to the table, his once confident demeanor replaced by barely concealed rage. Across from him, Chloe and Langston stared him down. "You've lost, Rourke," Chloe said, her voice steady. "Your operation is dismantled. Your men are turning on you, and your so-called allies? They're running for cover." Rourke smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You think you've won, Larson? You think this changes anything? There's always someone bigger pulling the strings." Langston leaned forward, his eyes cold. "And you're going to tell us who?" Rourke laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "You're wasting your time. The fixer doesn't talk. And even if he did, you wouldn't make it far. You don't know who you're dealing with." "Try me," Chloe shot back. Rourke's smirk faltered for a moment, replaced by something darker. "You'll see soon enough." Meanwhile, Riley was in the tech room, piecing together data from the confiscated drives they had recovered from the industrial complex. Hours of sifting through encrypted files finally paid off as a pattern began to emerge. "Chloe," Riley called them through the comms, "you're going to want to see this." Chloe joined her, staring at the screen. It displayed a web of connections, names, offshore accounts, and coded transactions. At the center of it all was a single entity, Umbra Holdings. "Umbra Holdings?" Chloe asked, frowning. Riley nodded. "It's a shell corporation, but it's massive. They're funding the Steel Vipers, laundering their money and supplying them with weapons." Langston stepped into the room, his face grim. "Umbra Holdings isn't just funding the Steel Vipers. They're the source of corruption that's been infecting this city. Politicians, law enforcement, even federal agencies, they're all connected." Chloe's stomach tightened. This wasn't just about the Steel Vipers anymore. This was about dismantling an entire network of power and greed. Later that day, Chloe and Langston met with federal agents to present their findings. Agent Daria Monroe, a seasoned investigator from the Organized Crime Task Force, listened intently as they laid out the evidence. "This is explosive," Monroe said, flipping through the files. "If we move on this, it'll shake the foundations of more than just this city." "Good," Chloe replied. "They've been hiding in the shadows for too long." Monroe nodded, her expression serious. "We'll need airtight coordination. Umbra Holdings has resources we can't even begin to estimate. If they get wind of this, they'll destroy the evidence before we can act." Langston crossed his arms. "Then we move fast. No leaks, no second guessing. We hit them hard and take everything." The team spent the next 48 hours planning a coordinated raid on Umbra Holdings' primary facilities. Intelligence showed that the company had 3 major locations: a high-rise office building downtown, a private warehouse near the port, and a secluded estate outside the city. Each location was heavily guarded, and each held pieces of the puzzle that would expose Umbra's operations to the world. As night fell on the day of the raid, Chloe stood with her team, dressed in tactical gear and ready for action. Max was at her side, his movements fluid and confident. The stakes had never been higher, but she felt a calm determination. "Tonight we end this," Chloe said, addressing the team. "No more hiding, no more running. We take back our city." The team nodded, their faces resolute. They split into 3 groups, each targeting one of Umbra's locations. Chloe, Max, and Langston would lead the assault on the high-rise, the nerve center of the operation. The high-rise loomed above them as they approached, its glass facade reflecting the city lights. Chloe and Max moved silently through the building's underground parking garage, their movements synchronized. Langston and the rest of the team followed close behind. Inside, the building was eerily quiet. Chloe's heart pounded as they ascended the stairwell, each step bringing them closer to the top-floor offices where Umbra's executives worked. When they reached the 20th floor, they were met with resistance, armed guards patrolling the hallway. Chloe signaled to Max, who moved ahead, his nose leading him to their position. Within moments, the guards were neutralized, their weapons secured. In the main office, the CEO of Umbra Holdings, Samuel Kane, sat at a sleek glass desk, his expression unreadable, as Chloe and Langston burst into the room. "Miss Larson," Kane said smoothly, leaning back in his chair, "I've been expecting you." Chloe raised her weapon, her gaze cold. "You're under arrest." Kane chuckled. "Do you really think this changes anything? Arrest me, and 10 more will take my place. That's the nature of power." "Not this time," Langston replied. "We've got everything we need to bring you and your entire network down." Kane's smirk faltered as Max stepped forward, growling low. Chloe kept her weapon trained on him as federal agents flooded the room, securing the scene. As dawn broke, the city began to wake to the news of the raids. Umbra Holdings was dismantled, its executives arrested, and its operations exposed. For the first time in years, there was hope for real change. Chloe stood outside the high-rise, watching the sunrise with Max by her side. Langston joined her, a rare smile on his face. "You did it," he said. "We did it," Chloe replied, her voice steady. "But there's still more to do." Langston nodded, one step at a time. Chloe knelt beside Max, scratching his ears. "You're the best partner I could ever ask for." Max wagged his tail, his eyes bright with loyalty and pride. Together they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. But their fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. 2 days after the raid on Umbra Holdings, the city was alive with news of the arrests. Every major media outlet ran headlines exposing the corporate giant's illicit operations, from arms trafficking to bribing high-ranking officials. For Chloe, Langston, and the rest of their team, it was a victory, but it didn't feel like the end. Chloe sat in the precinct's conference room, poring over documents recovered during the raids. Max rested at her feet, his ears twitching, as if he too sensed the tension in the air. The files painted a damning picture. Umbra Holdings wasn't just supporting the Steel Vipers. It was part of a larger, international network that fueled organized crime worldwide. Elena Cruz entered the room, holding a fresh stack of reports. "You're going to want to see this," she said, dropping them on the table. Forensics found encrypted communications in Umbra's systems. Some of them traced back to government servers. Chloe frowned, flipping through the documents. "Government servers? You're saying someone in the government was working with them?" Elena nodded grimly. "Not just someone, several high-level officials. These emails and transaction records connect Umbra Holdings to a classified defense program. They've been funneling stolen military-grade equipment to international buyers for years." Langston joined them, a cup of coffee in hand. "And let me guess, those officials are already trying to cover their tracks." "Exactly," Elena confirmed. "We've gotten word that some of them are pulling strings to suppress this investigation." "They're scared, Chloe. They know we're getting too close." Chloe's jaw tightened. "Good. Let them be scared." That afternoon, Chloe met with Agent Monroe from the Organized Crime Task Force. They stood in a secure operations room, its walls lined with monitors displaying live feeds from ongoing investigations. "We've traced Umbra's offshore accounts to a series of shell companies in the Cayman Islands," Monroe explained, pointing to a screen. "These accounts are linked to over a dozen government contracts. Whoever's behind this has been laundering money through federal projects." Chloe studied the map of connections, her mind racing. So Umbra wasn't just supporting criminal organizations. They were using government resources to do it. Monroe nodded. "And that means we're dealing with people who have access to classified information, military logistics, and political influence." Langston, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "We need to act fast. The longer we wait, the more time they have to bury the evidence." That evening, Chloe returned home, physically and emotionally drained. Max greeted her with a wagging tail, his presence a constant source of comfort. She sank onto the couch, stroking his fur as she replayed the day's revelations in her mind. "We're not done yet, buddy," she murmured. "Not by a long shot." Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a message from Riley. "Check your email. I found something you need to see." Chloe opened her laptop, her pulse quickening as she read Riley's findings. It was an internal memo from Umbra Holdings, recovered from their encrypted servers. The document detailed a secret meeting involving top executives, international buyers, and government officials. The location was set for the following night, an abandoned estate on the outskirts of the city. "This is it," Chloe whispered, determination surging through her. The final piece of the puzzle. The next day was a blur of preparation. Chloe and Langston briefed their team, laying out a plan to intercept the meeting and capture everyone involved. Federal agents would back them up, but the initial assault would fall to Chloe's unit. "We go in fast and hard," Langston said. "Our goal is to secure the participants and recover any evidence before they have a chance to escape or destroy it." As they reviewed the floor plans of the estate, Chloe's thoughts turned to Max. She looked down at him, his eyes locked on hers, as if he knew what was coming. "You ready for this?" she asked softly. Max barked once, his tail wagging, and Chloe smiled despite the tension. He had been her rock through everything, and she knew he would rise to the challenge again. Night fell quickly as the team approached the estate, their vehicles moving silently through the dense woods. Chloe sat in the passenger seat, her grip tight on her rifle as Max sat alert beside her. "Eyes on the prize," Langston said over the comms. "Remember, this is a coordinated strike. No one gets away." As they neared the property, Chloe spotted movement in the shadows, armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Riley's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Heat signatures confirm at least 20 hostiles outside, another dozen inside the main building." "Copy that," Chloe replied. "We'll take the north entrance." The assault began with precision. Chloe and Max led their team through the northern gate, neutralizing the guards with silent efficiency. Langston and the others breached the southern entrance, moving toward the main hall where the meeting was taking place. Inside, chaos erupted as the attendees realized they were under attack. Umbra executives and government officials scrambled to escape, but Chloe's team cut off every exit. Max darted ahead, his keen senses detecting hidden threats and alerting Chloe to ambushes. "Secure the documents," Langston shouted as agents stormed the room, gathering laptops, phones, and files. Chloe spotted Samuel Kane, Umbra's CEO, trying to flee through a side door. She pursued him, Max at her side. Kane turned, his face pale as he aimed a small pistol at her. Before he could fire, Max lunged, disarming him and pinning him to the ground. "Game over," Chloe said, cuffing Kane as Max stood guard, his growls low and menacing. By dawn, the operation was complete. Every attendee had been captured, and the evidence recovered was enough to dismantle the entire network. Chloe stood outside the estate, watching as federal agents loaded the suspects into armored vehicles. Langston approached, clapping her on the shoulder. "We did it." Chloe nodded, the weight of the victory settling over her. "Yeah, we did." Max trotted up to her, his tail wagging as she knelt to hug him. "You were amazing, buddy," she whispered. "I couldn't have done this without you." As the sun rose over the horizon, Chloe felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. The fight wasn't over. There were still trials to be held, sentences to be handed down, and reforms to be implemented. But for now, she allowed herself to breathe. Together, Chloe and Max had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. And as long as they stood together, she knew they could face whatever came next. The operation at the estate had sent shock waves through the city, but its impact reached far beyond. The arrests and the mountain of evidence recovered implicated powerful figures in government, business, and the criminal underworld. For Chloe, it marked a turning point, but the aftermath would prove just as challenging as the mission itself. A week later, Chloe sat in a federal courtroom, Max at her side. The atmosphere buzzed with tension as the first hearing began. Samuel Kane, the former CEO of Umbra Holdings, sat at the defendant's table, his expression cold and defiant. Beside him was Victor Viper, Kane, his brother and leader of the Steel Vipers, who had been brought in under heavy guard. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Madeline Grant, rose to address the court. "Your Honor, the defendants before you are at the center of a sprawling criminal network that has endangered lives, corrupted institutions, and undermined public trust. Today, we begin to hold them accountable." As the opening statements unfolded, Chloe's mind wandered to the victims of this network, the officers whose lives had been destroyed, the communities torn apart by violence, and the partners like Max who had suffered at the hands of ruthless criminals. Max nudged her hand, grounding her in the moment. She scratched behind his ears, grateful for his presence. That evening, Chloe joined Langston and Elena at a bar downtown. It was the first time in months that she allowed herself to relax, even if only for a moment. "To justice," Elena said, raising her glass. "To justice," Chloe and Langston echoed, though Chloe's voice was tinged with exhaustion. "You did good, Chloe," Langston said, his tone serious. "But this fight isn't over. The trial is just the beginning. They'll try to spin this, undermine the evidence, and protect the people at the top." "I know," Chloe replied, her jaw tightening. "But we've got the truth on our side. They can't hide from it forever." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of court proceedings, media scrutiny, and political fallout. Chloe was called to testify multiple times, recounting the operations that led to the takedown of Umbra Holdings and the Steel Vipers. Each time she spoke with conviction, her words carrying the weight of someone who had fought for justice every step of the way. The public rallied behind her. Stories of Max's bravery and Chloe's determination captured hearts across the nation, turning them into symbols of resilience and hope. Community organizations began advocating for reforms in law enforcement, corporate oversight, and government accountability. But not everyone was supportive. Chloe received threats, anonymous letters, ominous phone calls, and even attempts to smear her reputation. It was clear that some people still had a lot to lose if the truth came out. One evening, as Chloe prepared to leave the precinct, she found Langston waiting by her car. His expression was grim. "What's wrong?" she asked, her senses immediately on high alert. "We've uncovered a plot," Langston said. "Someone's trying to intimidate the witnesses in the case. There's a bounty on your head, Chloe." Chloe's stomach dropped, but she masked her fear with a steely resolve. "Let them come. I'm not backing down." "You need to be careful," Langston urged. "We'll increase security, but you need to keep Max close. If they can't get to you, they might go after him." The thought of losing Max again made Chloe's blood run cold. She nodded, her resolve hardening. They won't get that chance. As the trial continued, new revelations came to light. High-ranking officials were implicated, their names dragged into the spotlight as evidence linked them to the network. Among them was Senator Richard Wallace, a man who had built his career on promises of integrity and reform. His involvement sent shockwaves through the political landscape. When Senator Wallace was called to testify, the courtroom was packed. Chloe watched from the gallery, her eyes narrowing as he took the stand. "I have no knowledge of the criminal activities described," Wallace said, his voice calm but firm. "Any allegations against me are baseless." But the prosecutor was relentless. Piece by piece, she presented evidence that dismantled Wallace's denials, wire transfers, encrypted messages, and testimonies from co-conspirators. By the end of the day, his carefully constructed facade had crumbled. Back at home, Chloe sat on the floor of her living room, leaning against the couch as Max rested his head on her lap. She scrolled through news articles on her phone, each headline more damning than the last. "They're finally getting what they deserve," she said softly, running her fingers through Max's fur. "But it's not just about taking them down. We have to make sure this never happens again." Max looked up at her, his amber eyes full of understanding. Chloe smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. He had been her anchor through everything, a reminder of why she fought so hard. In the final days of the trial, the jury deliberated for hours before delivering their verdicts. Samuel Kane was found guilty on all counts, including conspiracy, racketeering, and arms trafficking. Victor Kane received a similar verdict, along with additional charges for orchestrating attacks on law enforcement. The courtroom erupted in cheers as the sentences were read. Chloe felt a wave of relief wash over her, though she knew the battle wasn't entirely over. As she exited the courthouse, reporters swarmed her, microphones and cameras thrust in her direction. "Detective Larson, what's next for you?" one reporter asked. Chloe glanced down at Max, who stood tall by her side, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. "What's next?" she said, her voice steady. "We rebuild, we reform, and we make sure that the people who tried to tear us apart never get the chance to do it again." Max barked in agreement, and the crowd erupted in applause. For Chloe and Max, the journey had been long and arduous, but they had emerged stronger. Together, they had faced corruption, violence, and betrayal, and they had won. Their story became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of partnership and the unyielding pursuit of justice. As the sun set over the city, Chloe looked ahead to a future filled with possibilities. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. Max would always be by her side, ready to face the darkness together. The fight for justice was far from over, but they were ready. Months after the trial's conclusion, the city of Riverside had begun to heal. The Steel Viper's reign of terror had ended, and their criminal network dismantled. Community trust, while not fully restored, was rebuilding step by step. For Chloe Larson, the fight had left its mark, not only on her but on the people she cared about. Yet amid the scars, there was also hope. On a crisp autumn morning, Chloe and Max walked through the newly constructed Riverside Canine Training Center. It had been Chloe's vision to turn their experiences into something meaningful, a place where officers and their canine partners could train and bond under the highest ethical and professional standards. Funding from community donations and federal grants had made it a reality. Detective Larson, a young officer called out, jogging over with a German shepherd at his side. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything. This place is incredible." Chloe smiled. "It's not just about the building. It's about what you and your partner take from it. Treat him as your equal, and you'll achieve more than you ever thought possible." The officer nodded earnestly, and Chloe watched as he guided his dog toward an agility course. Turning to Max, she patted his head. "We've come a long way, haven't we, partner?" Max wagged his tail, his sharp eyes scanning the activity around them. He had fully recovered from his injuries, his movements as agile and confident as ever. But more than that, Max seemed to carry a quiet pride, as if he understood the role he had played in reshaping the future of law enforcement in Riverside. Later that day, Chloe met Langston and Elena at the training center's dedication ceremony. The crowd was a mix of officers, community leaders, and families, all gathered to celebrate the opening of the facility. As Langston took the stage to deliver the opening remarks, Chloe stood back, her gaze drifting to the crowd. "Today isn't just about a building," Langston said, his voice commanding attention. "It's about the values this building represents: trust, integrity, and partnership. Detective Larson and Max have shown us what it means to fight for those values, and this training center will ensure that their legacy lives on." The crowd erupted in applause as Langston gestured for Chloe and Max to join him on stage. She hesitated for a moment, unused to the spotlight, but the gentle nudge of Max's nose gave her the courage to step forward. "Thank you," Chloe began, her voice steady. "This center isn't just for us. It's for every officer, every K9, and every community member who believes in justice. Max and I couldn't have done this alone. It was your support, your belief that made this possible." She paused, looking down at Max, who sat proudly at her side. "Max is more than a canine partner. He's a reminder of what we can accomplish when we work together. And together we'll ensure that no one ever feels powerless in the face of corruption and violence again." The applause was deafening as Chloe stepped back, her heart swelling with pride. She had fought hard for this moment, and it was worth every sacrifice. In the weeks that followed, Chloe took on a new role as the head of the K9 training division. Her days were filled with designing programs, mentoring young officers, and ensuring that the next generation of handlers embodied the principles she and Max had fought for. It was demanding work, but it gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Max thrived in his role as the center's unofficial mascot and demonstration dog. Whether he was leading training exercises or providing comfort to a nervous recruit, his presence brought a unique energy to the facility. It was as if he understood that his work wasn't done, that his story was still being written. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Chloe sat on the training center's porch, watching Max play with a group of puppies from the latest K9 recruits. Langston joined her, a mug of coffee in hand. "You've built something amazing here, Chloe," Langston said, his voice filled with admiration. "This place is going to change lives." Chloe nodded, her gaze fixed on Max. "It's not just me. Max did this too. He taught me what it means to never give up, even when the odds are stacked against you. Langston chuckled. He's a good teacher, that one. But don't sell yourself short. It was your determination that brought us all here. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the cool evening air carrying the faint sounds of laughter and barking from the training grounds. For the first time in a long time, Chloe felt at peace. As the months turned into years, the Riverside Canine Training Center became a model for other cities across the country. Chloe and Max traveled to share their story, advocating for reforms in law enforcement and canine training. They became symbols of resilience, proving that even in the face of immense challenges, change was possible. Chloe often thought back to the dark days after the attack on Max, when it felt like the world was crumbling around her. She never could have imagined that those moments of pain and anger would lead to something so profound. But as she looked at Max, now gray around the muzzle, but as spirited as ever, she knew it had all been worth it. Together they had faced the worst of humanity, and together they had made it better. The fight for justice never truly ended, but Chloe and Max were ready for whatever came next. The partnership that had started in darkness had become a beacon of hope, and their legacy would endure for generations to come. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please support me by clicking the logo in the bottom right corner to subscribe to my channel. This way you won't miss any of the exciting stories coming up. Thank you so much.